तस्य कल्याण गुणार्णवस्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्द महाप्रभु कीर्तन नृत्य गीता वादित्रमाध्यान् मनसुरसेना
महाप्रभु कीर्तन नृत्य गीता वादित्रमाध्यान् मनसुरसेना
रोमाञ्चकम्पा श्रुतरङ्गबाजो वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम्
रोमाञ्चकम्पा श्रुतरङ्गबाजो वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम्
श्रीविग्रहाराधननित्यनाना शृङ्गारतनमन्दिरमर्जनादो
शिविग्रहाराधननित्यनाना शृङ्गारतनमन्दिरमर्जनादो
युक्तश्च भक्तांश्च नियुञ्जतोऽपि वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम्
युक्तस्य भक्तंश्च नियुञ्जतोऽपि वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम्
चतुर्विधा श्रीभगवत्प्रसादो साध्वन्न तृप्तान् हरिभक्तसङ्घम्
चतुर्विधा श्रीभगवत्प्रसादो साध्वन्न तृप्तान् हरिभक्तसङ्घम्
कृत्यैव तृप्तिं भजत सदैव वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम्
कृत्यैव तृप्तिं भजत सदैव वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम्
श्रीराधिका माधवयोरपारा माधुर्यलीला गुणरूपनाम्ना
श्रीराधिका माधवयोरपारा माधुर्यरूपनाम्ना
प्रतिक्षणा स्वाधनलोलुपस्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम्
प्रतिक्षणा स्वाधनलोलुपस्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम्
निकुञ्जयोनो रतिकेलिसीधय यायलिभिर्युक्तिरपेक्षणीया
निकुञ्जयोनो रतिकेलिसीधय यायलिभिर्युक्तिरपेक्षणीया तत्रातिदाक्षाततिवल्लभस्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् अतिवल्लभस्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् साक्षाद्धरित्वेन समस्तशास्त्रे युक्तस्तथा भाव्यत एव शब्दी साक्षाद्धरित्वेन समस्तशास्त्रे युक्तस्तथा भाव्यत एव शब्दी किन्तु प्रभुर्या प्रिय एव तस्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् किन्तु प्रभुर्या प्रिय एव तस्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् यस्य प्रसादात् भगवत्प्रसादो
यस्य प्रसादान् न गति कुतोऽपि
Yasha prasada, Bhagavat prasada. Yasha prasada, nagati kutapi.
ध्यायन्स्तुवांस्तस्य यशस्त्रिसन्ध्यं वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम्
Dayam stuvam tasya yasati sandham. Vande Gurashi Charanaravinda.
वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दं वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम्
Vande Gurashi Charanaravinda. Vande Gurashi Charanaravinda.
वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दं वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम्
Vande Gurashi Charanaravinda. Vande Gurashi Charanaravinda.
नमो ॐ विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिनिति नामिने
Nama Vishnupada Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine.
नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादिसतारिणे
Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pachattadishatarine.
जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासदि गौर भक्तवृंद
Shri Krishna Chaitanya
चैतन्य
Prabhu Nityananda
नित्यानंद
Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda.
जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासदि गौर भक्तवृंद
Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda.
जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासदि गौर भक्तवृंद
Shri Krishna Chaitanya
चैतन्य
Prabhu Nityananda
नित्यानंद
Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda.
हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे
Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jaya Radha Nila Madhav Radha Nila Madhav Radhe.
Radha Nila Madhav, Radha Nila Madhav,
Jaya Jagannatha Baladeva Subhadra Jaya Sudarshana.
Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Baladeva, Subhadrama, Jaya Sudarshana.
Jaya Sitaram, Sitaram, Jaya Lakshman Hanuman.
Jaya Sitaram, Sitaram, Jaya Lakshmana Hanuman.
Jaya Lakshmi Narasimha, Jaya Lakshmi Narasimha, Lakshmi Narasimha, Jaya Lakshmi Narasimha.
Jaya Lakshmi Narasimha, Lakshmi Narasimha, Jaya Lakshmi Narasimha.
Jaya Gauranitai, Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai
Jaya Gauranitai, 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 Jaya
Jaya
Gauranitai.
Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada
Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada.
Jaya Jaya Gurudev 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev
Jaya Jaya Gurudev, 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev.
Nitai Gaur Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitai Gaur Hari Bol
Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Jai Vishnupada Paramsa Parvajagacharya Ashtuttara Sarasishimad ISKCON Pratishta Viviti Samstapakacharya Vaishnava Sramani Gaura Priyajana Krishna Prema Bhakti Datapatita Pavana. His Divine Grace Abhocharamina Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Shri Prabhupada Ji Ki Jai, Shri Gaurya Guru Varga Patiti Udhari Ki Jai, Shri Rupa Sanatana Bhatta Raghunatha Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Gunasat Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ji Ki Jai, Nanta Koti Vaishnava Vrindi Ki Jai, Prem Si Kaho Si Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrindi Ki Jai, Param Dayal Shri Nityananda Prabhu Ki Jai, Jai Pramanama Sankirtane Ka Janaka Prema Purushottama Shri Sachinandan Shman Gauranga Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Gaur Hari Mahavrana Avatar Ki Jai, Golokera Pramadhan Hari Nam Sankirtan Jaiga Ki Jai, Juga Dharma Hare Krishna Mahamantra Ki Jai, Brihabdanga Transcendental Book Distribution Seva Ki Jai, Shri Radha Krishna Gopakutna Radha Kund Syamakund Giriraj Govardhan Ki Jai, Shri Brajabhum Vrindavan Mathura Ki Jai, Their Lordship Shri Radhanjala Madhava Ki Jai, Shri Mayapura Madhya Ke Chakradam Ki Jai, Parama Karuna Shri Gaur Nitai Ki Jai, Shri Purushottama Kitra Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai, Shri Shri Jagannath Swami Baladev Prabhu, Srimati Subhadra Devi Sudarshan Chakra Bhagavan Ki Jai, Bhakti Sarva Vigna Vinashana Kanishingare Bhagavan Ki Jai, Jaganga Mai Jamuna Mai Ki Jai, Tulsi Maharani Vrindi Devi Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Bolo Shri Mathura Dharani Ki Jai, Samaveta Bhakta Vrindi Ki Jai, Nitai Gaurari Pramanande. All glories to the Assembly Bodies. All glories to the Assembly Bodies. All glories to the Assembly Bodies. All glories, all glories, all glories to Shri Shri Guru Shri Gauranga.
नमस्ते नरसिंहाय नमस्ते नरसिंहाय प्रह्लादलाददायिने हिरण्यकाशिपूर्वक्षः शीलटङ्कानकालाये इतो नरसिंहा परतो नरसिंहा परतो नरसिंहा यतो यतो यामि ततो नरसिंहा बाहिर्नरसिंहा हृदये नरसिंहा नरसिंहमदिं शरणं प्रपदे नरसिंहमदिं शरणं प्रपदे
शिपु
तनुभृङ्गा
केशवधृता
नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय केशवधृता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे
जय
केशवधृता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय नरसिंहदेव 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 जय प्रहलाद महाराज 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद जय जय गुरुदेव 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 जय जय गुरुदेव
जय जय गुरुदेव
गुरुदेव गुरुदेव जय जय गुरुदेव विघ्न विनाशक लक्ष्मी नरसिंहदेव भगवान की जय भक्त
जय जय श्री वृंदायै तुलसी भाई प्रिय केशव सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्राररे सत्यवताय नमो नमः वृंदायै तुलसी भाई प्रिय केशव सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्राररे सत्यवत्याय नमो नमः वृंदायै तुलसी देवाय प्रिय केशव सत्य कृष्ण भक्ति प्राररे सत्यवताय नमो नमः जय श्रीमती तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी की
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्णा प्रेयसी नमो नमः तुलसी राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावो हे अभिलाषी
राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावो हे अभिलाषी
राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावो हे अभिलाषी
राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावो
हे अभिलाषी ये तुम्हार शरण लो तारा वांछ पूर्ण हो
ये तुम्हारा शरण लो तारा वांछा पूर्ण हो।
कृपा कोरी कोरो तारे वृंदावन वासी
कृपा कोरी करो तारे
वृंदावन वासी मोरा अभिलाष विलास कुंज दियो वास
मोराए अभिलाष विलास कुंज दियो वास।
नयन हरि बो सदा युगल रूप राशि
अमिनायने
हरि बो सदा युगल रूप राशि हे निवेदन धार सखीरनुगत करो
निवेदनाधार
सखीरनुगत कार दिए करो निज दासी
सेवायाधिकार
दिए करो निज दासी दीना कृष्ण दास को ये नमोरा हो दीना कृष्ण दास को ये नमोरा हो श्री राधा गोविंदा प्रेमे सदाय नबासी श्री राधा गोविंदा प्रेमे सदाय नबासी यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिण पदे पदे तानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिण पदे पदे यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिण पदे पदे
तानि कानि च पापानि
ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिण पदे पदे हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Rama
Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama,
Rama Rama Hare Hare. Jaya Tulsi Maharani Jaya Tulsi Maharani Jaya Tulsi Maharani Jaya Tulsi Maharani
Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani,
Jaya Tulsi
Maharani,
Jaya Tulsi Maharani Jaya Vrinda Devi 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Gurudev 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev.
Shri Vrindai Tulasi Devai Priyai Ke Sabasatya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Satyai Bhatyai Namo Namah. Vrindai Tulasi Devai Priyai Ke Sabasatya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Satyai Bhatyai Namo Namah. Vrindai Tulasi Devai Priyai Ke Sabasatya Krishna Bhakti Prade Devi Satyai Bhatyai Namo Namah. Jai Tulsi Maharani Vrindi Devi Ki Jai. O Tulsi, beloved Krishna, I bow before you again and again. My desire to obtain the service of Shri Radha and Krishna. Whoever takes shelter of you, his wishes fulfilled. Bestow your mercy upon him, you make him resident of Vrindavan. My desire that you also grant me a residence in pleasure groves of Shri Vrindavan Dham. Last within my vision, all is the holy beautiful pastimes of Radha and Krishna. I beg to make me a follower of our James of Raj. Please give me the privilege of devotional service and make me your own maidservant. This very fallen and lowly servant Krishna praise. May I always sing in love with Shri Radha and Govinda. Shri Mati Tulsi Maharani Vrindi Devi Ki Jai. There are 10 offenses in matter of chanting the holy name of the Lord that should be avoided. They are as follows. 1. To blaspheme the devotees to dedicate their life for propagating the holy name of the Lord. 2. To consider names of demigods, the Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma, to be equal to or independent of the name of Lord Vishnu. 3. To disobey the orders of the spiritual master. 4. To blaspheme the very scriptures or scriptures in pursuance of Vedic version. 5. to consider the glories of chanting Hare Krishna to be imagination. 6. To give some interpretation to the holy name of the Lord. 7. To commit sinful activities on strength of chanting the holy name. 8. To consider the chanting of Hare Krishna as one of the auspicious ritualistic activities which are often in Vedas as fruitive activities, karma kanda. 9. To instruct the fearless person about the glories of holy name. And 10. Do not have complete faith in chanting the holy name, and to maintain material attachments, even after understanding so many instructions on this matter. It also an offense to be inattentive while chanting. Every devotee who claims to be Vaishnava must carefully guard against 10 offenses in order to quickly achieve the desired success. Krishna Prema. Now let us offer humble obeisance unto the Vaishnavas, devotees of the Lord. They are just like desired trees. They can fulfill the desires of everyone, and they are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. Jivancha kalpatarubhascha kripa sindhu vyaivacha paritanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo namo namah. Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavindi ki jai. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Sikyastakam ki jai. Chaito Darpanamajanam Bhava Mahada Bhagni Vapanam Shri Akari Vachandika Vitaranam Vidya Vadhu Jivanam Anandam Buddhivardhanam Pratipadam Purnamrita Shradanam Sarvatmasnam Param Param Vijayati Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Nam Namakari Vaudha Nija Shaktis Tatrarpita Niyamitta Shmarane Nakala Etadrushitava Kripaya Bhagavan Mamapi Durdhaivam Idrishamya Janinanuraga Trinadapi Sunichena Tarorapi Saishnuna Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sadahari Na Dhanam Na Janam Na Sundarim Kavitam Jagarisha Kamaye Mama Janmani Janmanishari Bhavatar Bhakti Raituki Twai Oi Nandatanuja Kinkaram Paritamam Same Bhavam Buddho Kripaya Tabapada Pankaja Sthita Dhuli Sadrisham Vichintaya Nayanam Galora Shrudharaya Bharanam Gadagadarudhaya Gira Pulakari Chitam Papukada Tavanamagrahane Bhavisyati Juga Itam Nimishena Chakusha Pravrusa Itam Sunya Itam Jagat Sarvam Govinda Virahena Me Asli Shava Padaratam Pinashtumam Adarshanar Marmahatam Karotuva Jatha Tathava Viradhatu Lampato Matpranatastu Saivana Para Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Sikyastakam ki jai. Namo Mahavarannaya Krishna Prema Pradayati Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namine Gauratvishe Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Devim Gaurvani Pracharine Nivishesha Sunnavari Pasatyari Satarine. Glory to the Shri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire conditioned life, repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan moment is the prime benediction for humanity at large, because it spreads the rays, the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which all is anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings, and thus you have hundreds and millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names, you have invested all your transcendental energies. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness, you enable us to easily approach you by holy names, but I'm so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. Once we chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than straw in the street, one should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer respect to others. In such state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your cause that devotional service birth after birth. O son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor. Yes, some rather I am fallen in this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from the ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. O my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up? And will the hairs of my body stand on end at the recitation of your name? O Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I'm feeling all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna is my Lord, and he should remain so. Even if sunders me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me, he is completely free to do anything and everything for his my worshipful Lord unconditionally. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shri Krishna Kam Ki Jai. Shri Guru Vandana Mangala Charan. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Shri Chaitanya Manovistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swaparantikam Bandeyam Shri Guru Sri Jotapara Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatha Vintam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakambitam Cha Nama Om Vishnu Padayo Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devam Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Patsatyari Satarine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Shmate Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Iti Namini Shri Varshavanavi Devi Deitaya Kripavdvaye Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Daine Prabhave Nama Madhurjo Jala Primadhya Shri Rupanuga Bhaktida Shri Gaura Karuna Shakti Vigrahaya Namostute Namaste Gauravani Shri Murtai Dinatarine Rupanuga Viruddho Posiddhanta Dvantarine Namagore Kishoraya Sakcha Vairagya Murthaye Vipralambhara Sambodhi Parambhujayate Namaha Namo Bhakti Vinodaya Satchit Anandanamine Gora Shakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Varayate Gaura Virbhavam Visvam Nirdesha Sajana Priya Vaishnava Sarva Bhuma Sri Jagannatayate Namaha Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyaiva cha paritanam pavanebhyo vaishnavibhyo namo 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 mahavarannaya Krishna prema pradayate Krishnaya Krishna chaitanya namine gauratvishe namaha Panchatattvamakam Krishna bhaktarupa sarupakam bhaktavataro bhaktakyam namami bhakta shaktikam He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanto Radha Kanto Namostute Jayatam Suratupango Mama Mandamatir Gatir Masarvasvat Padambujo Radha Madana Mohanao Divya Vindaranya Kalpadumadha Shmara Nagara Shingasanastu Shmaradha Shila Govinda Devo Prishtalivi Shiva Manushmarami Shman Rasara Sarambi Vamshvato Tatastita Karshan Venu Swanar Gopir Gopinata Shriyestuna Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhi Vrindavanishwari Vrusabhanu Sutedevi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Shri Mangala Charan Guru Vandan ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 30, and verse number 9. First of all, I'd like to say I feel very humbled being here. I came here the first time, 1972, when the temple was still being built. The only thing here was some of these pillars and Prabhupada's Vyasatsan, and then Prabhupada's house. Okay. And there was no place for brahmacharis to sleep, so I was sleeping on a sand dune outside here. And Prabhupada had his room, but it was very hot at that time, so he was sleeping outside with a mosquito tent. And I had the great opportunity of being able to serve Prabhupada. I was asked by his servant to fetch water from the well. There was no running water at that time. So there was a well out here somewhere, and they gave me a stick to put on my back and 2 buckets. And I went to the well and drew water out of the well and filled one bucket and the other bucket. And then I went back like this. And I gave it to the servant, and Prabhupada was there. And the servant said, "Don't go away. I'm going to give you something." He said, "Nobody else wanted to do this. You did it, so you're going to get a special gift." So he took the water into Prabhupada, and Prabhupada began to take his bath. And he came back. He said, "I just swept Prabhupada's room." And he gave me a tin can like that. He said, "This is the dust from his lotus feet." So that was very nice. And at that time, this was, Vrindavan was a small village. There were no cars. There were just tangas and some rickshaws. And, but it was very transcendental. And I remember the first thing I did was go on parikram the next morning. There was a dog here at that time that was asthmatic, and he would, all night long, he'd go like that. But he never left this compound. And we would, there was one, let's say, toilet bucket in the corner over here of the property. And after we would eat on the palm leaves, we would go and throw the leaves near the toilet, and the dog would come and lick the food. So it became clear that this dog was very special. It was definitely a Brijbasi in a previous life that must have made some mistake. And whenever Prabhupada gave a lecture here, the dog would come as close as possible to hear it. And we knew that because you could hear him going, like that, you know. And so this is a magical place, even though they've done so much building here, but it's still magical, it's still a wonderful place. It is Vrindavan, and you're very lucky to be here. I feel very fortunate to be here. I'm going to offer my obeisances to everyone and thank the leadership of this temple. They were doing a great job. give me a few minutes to talk about Prabhupada and Krishna. So, the following verse. Chuta Priyala Prasasana Kovidara Jamvarka Bilva Bakulamra Kadamba Nipaha Bakulamra Kadamba Nipaha Yene Parata Bhavavaka Yamuna Pakula Samsantu Krishna Padavim Rahitatmanam Na Chuta Priyala Panasasana Kovidara Jamvarka Bilva Bakulam Rakadamba Nipaha Yene Pararta Bhavaka Yamuna Pakula Samsantu Krishna Padavim Rahitatmanam Na Chuta Priyala Parasasana Kovidara Jamvarka Bilva Bakulam Rakadamba Nipaha Yene Parata Bhavaka Yamuna Pavakula Samsantu Krishna Padavim Rahitatmanam Na Everybody? Yene Parata Bhavaka Yamuna Pukala Samsantu Krishna Padavim Ratatmanam Na Chita Priyala Parasasana Kovidara Jamvarka Bilva Bahulam Rakadamba Nipa Yene Parata Bhavaka Yamuna Palaka Samsantu Krishna Padavim Rahitatmanam Na Ladies. Chuta Priyala Panasasana Kovidara Jamvarka Bilva Bakudamba Nipa Yene Parata Bhavaka Yamuna Pavakula Samsantu Krishna Padavim Rahitatmanam Na Chuta Priyala Panasasana Kovidara Jamvarka Bilva Bahulam Rakadamba Nipa Yene Parata Bhavaka Yamuna Pavaka Samsantu Krishna Padavim Rahitatmanam Na Chuta Priyala Panasasana Kovidara Jamvarka Bilva Bakulam Rakadamba Nipa Yene parata bhavaka yamuna palukala. Samsanta Krishna padavim rahatmanuna. Okay, so, oh, chuta, oh, mango creeper, priyala, oh, priyala tree, a kind of sala tree, panasa, oh, jackfruit tree, asana, oh, asana tree, a yellow sala, kovidara, oh, kovidara tree, jambu, oh, rose apple tree, arka, oh, arka plant, bilva, oh, bell fruit tree, bakula, oh, mimosa tree, amra, oh, mango tree, kadamba, oh, kadamba tree, nipa, oh, nipa, a smaller kind of kadamba, ye, who, anye, others, para, of others, arta, for the sake, bhavakaha, whose existence, yamuna upakula, living near the bank of the river Yamuna, Samsantu, kindly tell, Krishna Padavim, the path of Krishna has taken. Rahita, who have been deprived. Atmanam, of our minds. Na, to us. Translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. O Chuta, O Priyala, O Panasa, Asana and Kovidara, O Jambu, O Arka, O Bilva, Bakula and Amra, O Kadamba and Nipa, and all you other plants and trees living by the banks of the Yamuna, who have dedicated your very existence to the welfare of others, we gopis have lost our minds, so please tell us where Krishna has gone. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, the chuta is a mango creeper, whereas the amra is a mango tree. He goes on to explain that the nipa, though not a very prominent tree, bears large flowers, and that the gopis' desperation to find Krishna is clearly shown by the fact that they approach the insignificant arka plant. Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti gives the following information about Vrindavana trees. The nipa is the dust kadamba, and it has large flowers. The kadamba proper has smaller flowers and a very pleasant fragrance. The kovidara is a particular kind of kanchanara, or mountain ebony tree. Even though the arka plant is very insignificant, it always grows near Lord Gopishwara, the Shiva deity in Vrindavana, or Vrindavana forest, because it is dear to him. O Chuta, O Priyala, O Panasa, Asana and Kovidara, O Jambu, O Arka, O Bilva, Bakula and Amra, O Kadamba and Nipa, and all you other plants and trees living by the banks of the Yamuna, who have dedicated your very existence to the welfare of others, we gopis have lost our minds. So please tell us where Krishna has gone. So this is a very interesting verse. First of all, this is all about Krishna hiding somewhere in the forest of Vrindavan. After the Rasa dance, Krishna, during the Rasa dance, although he was dancing with the different gopis, he walked away with Srimati Radharani and disappeared. And when the gopis realized this, they were devastated. And why did Krishna walk away? Because the gopis became proud that they were having so much attention of Krishna. So obviously, when it says, Amanitvam, Idamitvam, Ahimsa Santir Arjavam, Acharya Pasmam Socham, Staryam Atma Vinigraha. So the first step in spiritual education is humility. And the second step is pridelessness. So Krishna doesn't like his devotees to become falsely proud. This is a no-no for a spiritual person. One must learn this humility. Knowledge without humility is actually going to be abusive. So the first thing we should learn is how to be humble, just like to approach a spiritual master. Tadvidi paripatena paripastena sevaya upadeksyami te jnanam ganinas tatpadarshinaha. One should approach the bona fide spiritual master with three attitudes. That is panipat, submissiveness, paripastena, asking significant questions, and seva, offering service to the spiritual master. And there's not just one spiritual master. There are three spiritual masters. There's the Vartma Pradakshika Guru, who introduces you to Krishna. There's the Shiksha Guru, who gives significant instructions to the neophyte. And there's the initiating Guru, who represents the like the bulwark, the foundation of following regulative principles and following all the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness. And according to the Srimad Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Lila, verses 35 and 47, the Shiksha and Diksha Gurus are equal in importance in the life of a devotee. One can have only one initiating Guru, but one can have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Shiksha Gurus. This is important because, especially now that the movement has grown significantly, and there are many, I would say many advanced devotees in ISKCON, and many of them are here. So you have 360 degrees of gurus, Shiksha and Diksha Gurus. So there's no dearth of opportunity to learn about Krishna. And the whole goal of Krishna consciousness and to Shruti, or the Vedic literature, is to learn the science of Krishna. This word science is important because the definitions in most English dictionaries are incomplete or misleading. Science means fact. That means that it's not a theory. It's something that is true in all realms of existence, whether it's the material world or the spiritual world, and it is always time. It's true in the past, it's true in the future, and it's true in the present. That is what science is. It's fact that cannot be altered. So therefore, when you go to these public schools or different schools, they don't really teach you science. They're teaching you mainly theories. And those theories are changing a lot also. That means that they're not fact. Everything in the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam is science. It's true in the past, it's true in the present, it's true in the future, it's true in all places, whether in the material world or the spiritual world. So the Srimad Bhagavatam is the only book in the universe, not only on the Earth planet, but in the whole universe, that gives detailed information on who God is and what's going on in the spiritual world. There's no other book like this. Therefore, we don't really realize how important the Srimad Bhagavatam is, because it is the science of Krishna. And Prabhupada wanted us to learn the science of Krishna. And because Krishna is the most unique person. Brahmabhuta Prasanna Nasochatina. I'm sorry. Krishna is the most unique person. He has the most unique qualities. He's the cause of all causes. He is never born. He never gets old. He never dies. If you go to the Sistine Chapel in Rome, you will see a picture of God on the ceiling. It's very imposing. And he's an old man with wrinkles and gray hair. That means the Pope at that time did not really understand who God is. We know that Krishna is Navayovanancha. He never grows old. That's one of his transcendental qualities. You have the Astagunas, and you have the 6 opulences of the Lord, and you have the Astashaktis. So these are unique qualities of the Lord that maybe a few of them are shared with others, like demigods and some human beings, but none of them come close to equaling Krishna's absolute control and power of these unique qualities. So when we learn the science of Krishna, then it is an infallible science. You cannot go wrong. You cannot be defeated in any discussion. But our purpose is not to defeat people in discussions. Our purpose is to educate them. So that requires humility and patience. It's very difficult to convince people in Kali Yuga to become a genuine devotee. And even when they become devotees, it's difficult for them to maintain this high standard of following Krishna consciousness. And one time a lady told me, you know, next time our Gurudev comes, I'm going to tell him about this one person here who's a nonsense. I said, Mataji, what did you promise your Guru when you got initiated? She said, well, I promised to follow the regulative principles, chant Hare Krishna. I said, that's what you should talk to your Guru about. It's not your business to complain about somebody. That's why you have a temple president and temple authorities. You can tell them, and if they think it's a valid saying, then they'll explain to the Guru. But your duty is to follow the regulative principles and chant 16 good rounds minimum a day. Then your Guru will be very pleased with you. He's not going to be pleased with you if you complain about someone. So, therefore, in this Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, chapter 30, and verse 9, that whole part of the Bhagavatam is about the gopis' extreme transcendental love for the Lord. Now, this is what Lord Chaitanya was teaching when he came to this world. This is the difference between mundane spirituality and transcendental knowledge of God and the practice of pure devotional service. It means how to love God. Unless we actually love God, we have not really understood Lord Chaitanya's movement. He taught this ecstatic love of God that's so imperative and so all-encompassing that eventually you cannot think of anything else. Now we have an example of that. This is explained in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Lila, chapter 4, where it says, the pure love of the gopis has become celebrated by the name lust. The dear devotees of the Lord, headed by Sri Uddhava, desire to taste that love. Now, lust has a bad connotation in the material world, but the material world is a perverted reflection of the spiritual world. That means whatever's happening in the spiritual world, a facsimile of it happens in the material world, but it's an upside down or perverted representation of it in darkness. Now, what does that mean exactly? A reflection in darkness. It's important to understand what it is. if you're driving in a car at night and there's street lights on one side and there's darkness on two sides, in front of you and on your left-hand side, if you look through the window, the left-hand side, you'll see an image of yourself outside the window. That is a reflection in darkness. See? So there has to be darkness on one side, and there has to be some light on another side. And then there's a mirror. It's not a mirror, there's a window, but you'll see your reflection in the window. Now, is that reflection real? No. It only points to something that's real, that's you. So that is what is called a reflection in darkness, and it's a perverted reflection. Everything we see here is upside down, and it's not a correct representation of what's in the spiritual world. So in the spiritual world, what do we hear? Lust and love have different characteristics, just as iron and gold have different natures. And the purport Prabhupada says, one should try to discriminate between sexual love and pure love, for they belong to different categories with a gulf of difference between them. They are as different from one another as iron is from gold. Now, one time in France, we were going to purchase a property in Paris, and this gentleman came who was a real estate agent. And he was a very, very unique person. Whenever he would speak, he would punctuate his speaking with like that. I don't know why he did that, but he did that over and over again. So we didn't want to insult him in any way, but I've never met a person like that before in my life. So anyway, I wanted to help him, so I showed him a picture of in Srimad Bhagavatam of Sukadeva Goswami, who was naked, and he was walking past, I guess the Yamuna River, and there were a lot of ladies or gopis in the water bathing, and they were naked, and then Vyasadeva was following him, and I showed this to this gentleman, right? And he had a fixation on that picture. And I asked him, he went on for about a minute, and I said, "Sir," I said, "what are you seeing?" He said, "Oh, this is real spirituality." I said, "But what are you seeing?" He said, "This is what I want." I said, "Okay, but what are you seeing?" He said, "Well, the ladies are nude and that boy is nude. That's what I want." I said, "No," I said, "you're not seeing it correctly." Now you see, what actually happened there? In Sanskrit, there's a word for philosophy. And in English, there's a word for philosophy. It's philosophy. It's made up of two Greek words. And it means the love of wisdom. But in Sanskrit, it's completely different. The word for philosophy is darshan, how you see. So a mother sees her child with love and protection. A child molester looks at the same child and sees an object for exploitation. Two people looking to the same thing have two different understandings. So that is true then. The real word for philosophy is darshan. So here is this man, he's seeing this, actually a transcendental picture of a pure devotee, Sukadeva Goswami, and the gopis, who, when they saw that Vyasadeva was behind them, they hid their nakedness right away, because Vyasadeva was a grihastha, and they're supposed to differentiate between this body and that body. Whereas when the gopis saw Sukadeva Goswami, they did not see a person, they saw a person who did not discriminate, who wasn't seeing the body, but was seeing rather the soul, and also the presence of Paramatma. So this is what Prabhupada saw also when he came to New York into the lower Manhattan, the Bowery, one of the worst places in the United States. I unfortunately was there a little bit later after Prabhupada came. That was the most degraded place full of perverts. But he didn't see that. What he saw was, he saw something he was surprised at. He didn't think that he would see people sleeping in the streets, but he saw them in the Bowery, and he saw a lot of young kids that were taking drugs and ruining their lives. And but actually what he saw was that they had Krishna in their heart, and they have eternal soul, an eternal relationship with Krishna. And in a miraculous way, starting with nothing, he was able to build up this big building. And his first students were all basically hippies and people that were engaged in all the breaking the four regulative principles and determined to do that. But he was able to convince them to become devotees. Now, this is a miracle. How do I know it's a miracle? Because in 1996, I organized a centennial program for Prabhupada's 100th anniversary, and it was in San Jose. But at that time, there was a large community of devotees from ISKCON who converted to Gaudiya Math, and we allowed that the main speaker would be Govinda Das, the main disciple of Sridhar Swami, but after Sridhar Swami disappeared. And at that time, when Govinda Maharaj came, we respected him, and he began his speech. And he said, "Today I have come here to do what you people do. That is, I'm going to make a confession. You do that in your religion, is it not?" And everyone went, "Yes." So he said, "I'm going to make a confession." He said, "When we heard about your Guru Maharaj, your Prabhupada, that he went to America and he was making so many devotees, Americans, into Vaishnavas, we couldn't believe it. My Gurudev and I sat here in Navadvip, and we heard these things, but it was very hard for us to believe it." Now, why did he say that it's hard to believe? Because in the 1930s, Bhan Maharaj was sent by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and he funded him for almost 4 years to stay in London and preach. And there were two other devotees. One went to Germany, and the other went, I think, to Germany also, I'm not sure. And all three of them failed. And when they came back, Bhan Maharaj openly said to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, "Your process doesn't work," which is very insulting. And nobody tried to go to the United States or to the West after that. Nobody in the Gaudiya Math. It was only Prabhupada who went through tremendous travails to come to the United States, having 2 heart attacks, being almost murdered by some crazy hippie who took LSD. He was staying with him. His copy, his manuscript of the Bhagavad Gita that he wanted printed was stolen. His typewriter was stolen. He was struggling. And sometimes he was thinking of going back to India, but he decided he was going to stay somehow or other. But he had complete faith in Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and in Krishna. So because of that complete faith and determination to basically do the duty that he was given of spreading Krishna consciousness in the Western world, he tolerated so many things, and all of a sudden there was the Hare Krishna explosion. And this was a miracle. Why? Because he was empowered by the parampara and his guru to do it, because he had absolute faith. The position of a devotee is determined by how much faith they have in Krishna, and Radha and Krishna, and in the acharyas, and ultimately in Krishna, the Supreme Personality Godhead. So, therefore, they were flummoxed. They were confused. How did he do it? So then Govinda Maharaj said, so today I've come to make a confession that after my Gurudev left, I became the leader of the movement, Armat, and eventually I started going to the West, and I saw with my own eyes what Prabhupada did. But I have to admit, I still couldn't believe it. How could he do such a thing in such a difficult place? And he said, now this is my confession. All we are doing is just eating the remnants of your Prabhupada. That was an amazing statement that he made. He was very humble, and he was sincere about that. So, although there might be some differences, but a gentleman like that made such a statement about Prabhupada actually influenced me to have a different view of things. Then I realized Prabhupada is a genuine genuine pure devotee of the Lord, not by any votes, but by his actions. And back in 1972 here, I was here for Prabhupada's Vyasa Puja offering, and the main guest was Ban Maharaj. Ban Maharaj has a big property, or he did have a big property across the street. Prabhupada was wanting to convince him to give that property to Prabhupada so he could expand Krishna consciousness. He never did that. And he was the one that told Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, your process doesn't work. And now Prabhupada was building this big temple across the street from his place, and there were so many devotees here. Almost all of them were Western devotees. His so-called white elephants. And Ban Maharaj was sitting there, and he was definitely a very stately, very, very imposing person. He looked something like Aurobindo. You could tell he was highly educated and a gentleman. And then Gargamuni Maharaj came. He came, and Bhavananda and other sannyasis from Mayapur. And Gargamuni Maharaj got up to speak. And he began to say in very, very, let's say, emphatic ways. He said, Srila Prabhupada is the only disciple of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur that had the faith and determination to spread this movement throughout the world. Nobody else was able to do it. Now, when he said that, immediately I looked at Ban Maharaj to see how he was going to react to that. But he was stoic. He didn't battle an eyelash, you know. But Gargamuni Maharaj didn't stop. He kept going forward with more and more emphatic statements, glorifying Prabhupada and emphasizing how he was the only one in the whole Gaudiya Math that actually was able to spread this movement. And because he had complete faith and love for his Guru Maharaj, and he was empowered to do it because of that faith. So now we see that faith is the number one thing that will determine who we are in Krishna consciousness. Faith in Guru and in Krishna. That's the bulwark, that's the foundation of our whole life. So at one point, it was Ban Maharaj's turn to speak. And I was like a little bit embarrassed. I was thinking, why is he speaking so emphatically? You know, it's like he's like punching him in the mouth or something, you know. So, but I looked at Prabhupada also, and Prabhupada was happy. He was enjoying it, you know. So, when Ban Maharaj spoke, he spoke in a very, let's say, tight-lipped way, and he said that, well, of course, we cannot deny that your Prabhupada has done a very meritorious service in the Western world. That's about all he said. And you could tell he was disturbed by the whole thing, right? I looked at Prabhupada, he was smiling. So you see what happens in life. Everybody has a chance. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur gave that duty not just to Prabhupada, he gave it to many of his leading disciples, but they were not able to do it. Of course, that doesn't mean they're bad. They just did not have the, let's say, level of faith that Prabhupada did. They also have done meritorious things. They have mats, they have devotees, and we should always be very respectful of them. But we have to understand the uniqueness of Srila Prabhupada. That is what's going to determine our spiritual life also. Our determination to be always loyal to Prabhupada and the Vaishnava Acharyas. Now, what does that mean, that loyalty? That means to be an effective preacher, all you have to do is just repeat what Krishna has said and what the Acharyas have also validated and said, and what Srila Prabhupada has said. You don't have to make up anything. You don't want to be like Gandhi. Gandhi writes a commentary on Bhagavad Gita and it says it's all about nonviolence. What? Nonviolence? How can you say that? The whole thing is about violence, right? But justified violence. So you see, this is going on. And Prabhupada said, you know, why are they piggybacking on the Bhagavad Gita? Why doesn't he write his own book and talk about nonviolence? No, they want to use the Bhagavad Gita to get the attention of the people, and then they give their own opinion. So this is complete nonsense. And Prabhupada said, my only qualification is I simply repeated what my Guru Maharaj told me, and I never made anything up. I never speculated in any way. I simply have repeated the words of the Acharyas and Prabhupada and Krishna. So here it says, talking about the gopis again, the desire to gratify one's own senses is kama, lust. But the desire to please the senses of Lord Krishna is prema, love. If there is ample reason for the dissolution of a conjugal relationship, and yet a dissolution, or in other words, a divorce, does not take place, such a relationship of intimate love is called pure. So this is the thing about relationships. We can only define or find out who we are through relationships. If we live in a vacuum, it would be difficult to understand who we are. Just like when Brahma first appeared, he couldn't understand who he is. He didn't see his origin. The creation hadn't taken place yet. He went through the whole stem of the flower, and it was all darkness, and he came back on the whorl of the lotus flower, and then he heard tapa. Now, because he had a previous life, he understood what that meant. It meant austerity. So he began a severe austerity. And actually, if you read the Bhagavatam, he meditated for 311 trillion 40 billion years. That's his lifespan. He meditated, and after that, then he had his lifespan also. So look how long he meditated in order to be able to hear Krishna's flute and be enlivened and understand something about the spiritual world and understand his duty in the material world. Now, today, we don't have to meditate 311 trillion years, because Lord Chaitanya made this movement very easy. All you have to do is chant Hare Krishna sincerely and follow the regulative principles and preach this knowledge, this transcendental knowledge, and take prasadam and dance ecstatically and go on Sankirtan, and you go back to Godhead. What could be easier than that? When the karmis want to enjoy, what do? They sing, they dance, they eat food, and of course they talk nonsense, but they're singing and dancing, right? So this is Lord Chaitanya's movement. He made it easy for everyone to go back to Godhead. And plus, there are special things in Kali Yuga. They're called dispensations or perks, things that are special about this age. They're actually good. Now, Kali Yuga is the worst time to live. That's why these special dispensations have been given by the Lord. What are they? Number one, previously, if you thought about doing something good, you didn't get the result. You would have to actually do it. And then secondly, previously, if you thought about doing something bad, you immediately got the karmic reaction, whether you did it or not. Number three, Kaliradosa Nidei Rajan Astihi Eka Mahadguna Kirtana Deva Krishnasya Mukta Sangha Sijayate. Simply by chanting Hare Krishna sincerely, you can go back to Godhead. And number four, Nahabikramanastasti pratijayana vidyate swapam apyasya dharmasya chayate mahato bhayat. Whatever you do in Krishna consciousness remains an eternal asset. If you do 1% in this life, next life you begin at 2%. That's if you get a human body, right? But you will, because you did devotional service. So you cannot be a loser in Krishna consciousness. It's not like the material world. Everybody is a loser in the material world. Everyone gets old, they get sick, and they die, right? And then they're born again, and to repeat that. So everything is made by Lord Chaitanya, who is most merciful because he's a combination of Radha and Krishna. It's not just Krishna, it's Radha and Krishna. He's made it easy for us to be Krishna conscious. And Prabhupada, once he said something, he said, I don't understand, he said, this process is so easy and so pleasant. Why don't they just accept it so quickly? They're reluctant to accept this. And that was right. And one time I asked Prabhupada, I said, why did you come to the United States? He said, well, first godbrother went to England, other godbrother went to Germany. First one failed, second one failed. I thought, let me fail in a different place. He actually said that. So that shows his ultimate, humility. But he didn't fail because he never deviated from his guru's instructions and never had a doubt about what he was doing. And he prevailed. So that is what we have to learn to do. Have so much faith in our spiritual master and Krishna that we have a one-track mind to spread this movement to every person in every country in the world. And by the way, Kali Yuga is the best time for a preacher, because almost everybody you meet doesn't know anything about Krishna. So if you're a preacher, this is a wonderful time, because you can preach 24 hours a day all over the world, and it's unending, the bliss you can experience in seeing people become Krishna conscious. Okay, so then it says here in the purport, the predominated gopis were bound to Krishna in such pure love. For them, there was no question of sexual love based on sense gratification. Their only engagement in life was to see Krishna happy in all respects, regardless of their own personal interests. They dedicated their souls only for the satisfaction of the personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna. There was not the slightest tinge of sexual love between the gopis and Krishna. Well, now there is a difference between love or sex in the material world and the transcendental so-called sex in the spiritual world. because the material world is just a perverted reflection of the spiritual world. There's actually pure sexual relationships in the spiritual world. But what does that mean exactly? It means that in the spiritual world, there's no personal motive. The only motive is to please Krishna. So the gopis, they say the following: now, whatever affection we see the gopis show for their own bodies, know it for certain to be only for the sake of Lord Krishna. The selfless love of Godhead exhibited by the gopis cannot have any parallel. We should not, therefore, misunderstand the carefulness of the gopis in their personal decoration. The gopis dressed themselves as beautifully as possible just to make Krishna happy by seeing them. They had no ulterior desire. They dedicated their bodies and everything they possessed to the service of Sri Krishna, taking it for granted that their bodies were meant for his enjoyment. They dressed themselves with the understanding that Krishna would be happy by seeing and touching them. The gopis think, I have offered this body to Lord Krishna. He is its owner, and it brings him enjoyment. Krishna finds joy in seeing and touching this body. It is for this reason that they cleanse and decorate their bodies. Now, this is incomprehensible, because in this world, there is Purusha and Prakriti. Prakriti is what is enjoyed, and Purusha is the enjoyer. But the understanding of Purusha and Prakriti is confused in the material world. Like, for example, Krishna is the ultimate Purusha, and we are all Prakriti. The so-called men and women, we're both Prakriti. But today, the men want to be Purusha and exploit and enjoy the women. And now there are women that want to be Purusha and subordinate the men. So everything is mixed up here in this material world. One time Prabhupada told me, he said, in this Kali Yuga, everything is backwards. And he was right. We are all Prakriti, whether you're male or female, and we are meant to give enjoyment to Krishna, not to exploit each other. So this is, now we see that the love of the gopis and the so-called transcendental sex in the spiritual world has nothing to do with plumbing or with reproduction, because they're all eternal. They don't have to reproduce. So the ecstasy in the spiritual world is pleasing Krishna. This is the only thing the gopis are thinking about. And therefore it says, the love of the gopis nourishes the sweetness of Lord Krishna. That sweetness in turn increases their love, for they are greatly satisfied. The happiness of the abode of love is in the happiness of the object of love. This is not a relationship of desire for personal gratification. So to understand, here we have all this information now. What are we going to do with it? Prabhupada spent so much time writing his books and putting, actually his purports, he said, were his spiritual ecstasies. And you can feel it. You can just by hearing this, you can feel not only he's telling the truth, but it's ecstatic, and it's completely different from what people understand in this world. So we should be overwhelmed with this and do everything possible to spread this message and spread Prabhupada's books and preach and spend the rest of our life just doing this. It takes time to understand the importance of Krishna consciousness and how relevant it is to this world. This is the only movement that has the knowledge and the organization to make people happy. But unless we follow the rules and regulations strictly, it'll never happen. You cannot be a phony, simply mouthing words. We have to have a very strong sadhana and very sincere chanting and very, very dedicated, let's say, preaching to spread this movement massively. Lord Chaitanya did not really preach in public. He just did ecstatic Sankirtan and massive food distribution. Those are the two astras of Vaishnavas. We don't have tanks and guns and machine guns and so forth. We have prasadam and we have Harinam Sankirtan. That should be, as you're doing here, increased, but massively all over the world. And then we'll see if 1% of the population becomes Krishna conscious, the whole world will become Krishna conscious. So it's not an impossible task. We can do it. What we don't need is people who deviate from strictly following the regulative principles. So now I'm going to say a few things about Bismastaki, what do you call it? Bisma Astami. So this Bisma Astami it happens during the Uttarayana period, that is when the sun goes from the southern hemisphere to the northern hemisphere. And you have Makara Sankranti that takes place, and then Vasant Panchami that takes place, and then the Bisma Astami, the day that Bisma chose to go back to Godhead. Now, for 58 days, he was stuck on the earth by the arrows of Arjuna. And during that time, the battle was still going on. He was knocked out of the battle on the 10th day. And of course, there were 18 days. And after that, the obsequies, all the funerals for everyone. And so he just waited, pinned down like that. And by the
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma Shri Guru Charana Kevala Bandho Muhi Savadhana Mote Bandho Muhi Bandho Muhi Savadhana Mote Bandho Muhi Savadhana Jahar prasade bhai e bhabaturiya jai jahar Krishna prapti hoye jaha aite Krishna prapti hoye jaha Guru mukha padma vakya Chite te kuriya kya Guru mukha और ना करी हो मने आसार करी गुरु चराने रति ऐसे उत्तम गति श्री गुरु जय प्रसादे पूरे सर्व आशा जय प्रसादे चक्षुदान दिलो जय जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से दिलो जय चक्षुदान दिलो जय जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से दिलो जय जन्मे प्रभु से दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो प्रेम भक्ति जाहा होइते अविद्या विनाश जते रे भक्ति जाहा होइते अविद्या विनाश वेदे गाय जाहर चरितो गाय जाहर तो वेदे गाय जाहर चरितो दे गाय श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आदम जनर बंधु गुरु करुणा सिंधु तम बंधु श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आदम जनर बंधु गुरु करुणा सिंधु आदम जनर बंधु लोकनाथ लोकेर जीवाना लोकनाथ लोकेर जीवाना लोकनाथ लोकेर जीवाना लोकनाथ लोकेर आहा प्रभु कोरो दया देह मोरे पद चया प्रभु कोरो दया देह हा प्रभु कोरो दया देह मोरे पद छया प्रभु कोरो दया देह एबे जग घोषुक त्रिभुवाना एबे जग घोषुक त्रिभुवाना शिला प्रभुपाद पतित पावना प्रभुपाद जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा नमः विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रस्थाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामीति नामिने नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रस्थाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे शून्यवादी जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिव सदि गौर भक्त वृंद जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिव सदि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा कृष्णा हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा कृष्णा हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे कृष्णा कृष्णा हरे 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 राम 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 हरे कृष्णा कृष्णा हरे हरे राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा कृष्णा हरे 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 राम हरे नी ताय गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल निताय गौर हरि बोल निताय गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल निताय गौर हरि बोल जय श्री प्रभुपाद की lotus feet of a spiritual master.
The lotus feet of our spiritual master are the only way by which we can attain pure devotional service. I bow to his lotus feet with great awe and reverence. By his grace, one can cross the ocean of material suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna. My only wish is to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus mouth. Attachment to his lotus feet is the perfection that fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord birth after birth. From him ecstatic prema emanates, by him ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing of his character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, the friend of the poor, and the Lord and master of the devotees. O Loknath Goswami, O Master, be merciful unto me. Give me the shade of your lotus feet. Your fame is spread all over the three worlds. We take the shelter of the lotus feet of Srila Prabhupada.